Hey there, this is Lyle Aspinall, one of your hosts for Mission Ready. I know you've been listening to the Drayden Woolman story this season, and thanks for that. But we need to interrupt things just briefly. See, at STARS, we lost our founder, Dr. Greg Powell, very recently. He passed away surrounded by family on April 30th, and we miss him dearly. It's causing us to reflect on just how amazingly significant his impact has been across Western Canada. As of this recording in May 2025, STARS has flown well more than 60,000 missions since it began in 1985. I had the amazing privilege of interviewing Dr. Powell for more than 2 hours last summer. He was very generous with his time. And at one point, he took a moment to reflect on that number.
I'm just as amazed at everyone else at 60,000 missions. You have to frame that in where we started, which was at nothing.
And that's why we are re-releasing now a bonus episode we first brought to you in Season 1. This is all about STAR's origins. So Drayden's story will return right on schedule in a few days, but for now, please check out this bonus episode and think about the incredible legacy of our founder, Dr. Greg Powell.
My name's Kelly Waldron, and I am STARS' very first VIP, and what VIP means is very important patient.
It's December 1st, 1985, and at a hospital in Lethbridge, Alberta, a new mom's twin babies have decided to enter the world 3 months early.
And she went into labor at 27 weeks gestation, so quite early. And Travis and I, that's my twin brother, we didn't want to wait. Lethbridge wasn't equipped to deal with premature twins at the time. I was definitely the worst one off. I was black and blue from head to toe. I had no heartbeat when I was born or anything like that. Whereas Travis did have a heartbeat and was in, a lot more stable condition. So that's how it was determined who got STARS. So that's when STARS came to get me. I know if I had to call on STARS, I wouldn't hesitate. They're there. I have every faith in them that they can do what they have to do.
From STARS Air Ambulance, this is Mission Ready, presented by WBM Technologies.
Welcome to Mission Ready. This is a bonus episode where we explore the origins of STARS. We're a nonprofit healthcare organization that provides pre-hospital critical care from 6 bases throughout Western Canada. I'm Deborah Tetley.
And I'm Lyle Aspinall. Thank you for joining us on this special episode of Mission Ready as we explore the evolution of STARS Air Ambulance by talking with patients and crew members, both past and present, and the doctor who helped inspire it.
It's the early 1980s, and people are dying who shouldn't be. There are people in the countryside who have been critically hurt or who have fallen seriously ill.
Their best chance at survival is to reach specialized care at a trauma center in the city, but it's a long way away and the system is not built to get them there quickly, nor to provide the care they need along the way. Emergency room physicians like Dr. Gregory Powell are growing increasingly frustrated. In fact, Dr. Powell still remembers the tragedy that changed everything.
This lady that came in was a perfectly normal pregnancy followed by a perfectly normal delivery in rural Alberta. And by the time she got to us, they'd run out of saline, they'd run out of every treatment they could do, and it was just a retained placenta, a very common complication of a normal delivery. And she perished just not long before she got to us. Not long later, the husband came through the door with the baby and other relatives and stuff, and mom's gone. It was very sad and very moving, I think, for all of us to say, okay, enough of this. We got to actually settle down and do something here. So that's when we started making phone calls and leased a helicopter.
And this really was the birth of STARS Air Ambulance. What began as a vision to help care for more critically ill or injured patients in remote areas has evolved into 6 bases operating across the Canadian prairies, a robust education and training program, and more than 45,000 missions.
And that's exactly what Dr. Powell hoped would happen when he envisioned a better future while he was working as an emergency room doctor at Foothills Medical Center in Calgary.
In the early days of 1980s, there was a lot of emphasis put on improving pre-hospital care for a lot of good reasons, most of it related to patients having difficulty getting to definitive care in reasonable amounts of time. So that became a lead for people to suggest better ground ambulances, better systems, and even helicopters were suggested at the time. In fact, one landed on the Foothills pad and tromped into the hospital to see me because they knew emergency physicians were likely the people who were going to try to make the system improvements along with ICU, because it's all about critically ill and injured patients. It was a very small helicopter, and I didn't think much about it, but that took me very quickly back to the days when I was 21 in medical school, low risk assessment skills, and decided on my way to do an elective with a flying doctor in Australia that I would stop in Vietnam and watch the war. That was an entirely bad decision on my part, because I got shot at and all that sort of stuff, but it was nevertheless planting a seed vision that I'll never forget. I walked into a MASH tent, and I was immediately, a surgeon said to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Canadian medical student. I just wanted to see." And he said, "Scrub sink's over there, gloves are there, get in there, there's incoming." And I could hear the helicopters coming. And before I knew it, I was scrubbed into the operating room receiving these people, and stayed a day or two and just thought, oh my goodness, like we're saving people here that I know would not be salvaged at home. So I left with that bit of thought process, and then went to Australia and flew with the fixed wing services out of Darwin, and also saw some pretty horrendous things that really had no access except air. So it was those learnings that when 1983 or 4 came along and things were pretty unstable in the pre-hospital care world, very jurisdictional, multiple ground ambulance systems all reporting to municipalities and cities, not well coordinated together for the most part, that I said, look, we need to try to move in the direction of coordinating all this. When you actually sat down, which we did, and did a study on the analysis of what was happening in the system, probably about 50% of people who should not be dying from major trauma, we're talking about here, not minor, were perishing. So places that had trauma teams and more organized systems were having a 50% difference in improvement in salvage rate for people who were critically ill or injured. We thought, well, this is doable, let's get on. And through a number of initiatives and steps, we circled to the helicopter and went out, and very smart businessmen that we were, MERS docs and ICU docs teaming up, we rented a helicopter. And before you could snap your fingers, we were $250,000 in debt.
That's a big bill, but they wouldn't let it deter them from their mission. Those original ER docs in Calgary who established the roots of STARS just wanted to give rural patients a fighting chance. Now they just had to figure out how to pay for it, so they asked for help. Dr. Powell and Dr. Rob Abernethy made a pitch to the local Lions Club, which eventually became STAR's first major donor. The two doctors, and Lions Club members Art Hironaka, John Panton, and David Dalgetty, are affectionately referred to as STAR's Founding Five. That sponsorship meant Dr. Powell and his colleagues could focus more on improving patient outcomes like they originally wanted, and less on the cost.
It was never the helicopter per se. It was, if ground ambulance is faster, we'll use that. If fixed wing aircraft, because we've got to go a long way, we'll use that. If we can't get to the patient because it's wilderness and we're coming out of a stretcher across the back of an ATV, we're going to do that. The interesting part worldwide is that because aviation is expensive and helicopters are an expensive part of aviation, then the driver sometimes becomes the aviation community and their ownership and need to make a profit. So that drives them wanting to interest you in leasing their helicopter versus this one, or whatever their needs were economically. And that's just the wrong direction. This should be medicine going to various transportation entities and saying, we need to partner with you to make this happen in the best possible way. So that was our approach.
That approach proved effective very quickly. Shortly after STARS launched, heads began to turn.
What became apparent is that the pre-hospital care statistics about morbidity and mortality were improving rapidly in southern Alberta, particularly for critical things. If you want to look on the medical side, heart attacks, surgical side, major trauma, neonatal side, and so on. So they quickly looked and said, that has to be those guys that are making that difference. Nothing else has changed.
Dr. Powell was on those early missions and saw firsthand the difference it was making for patients.
Whether it was in a fixed wing, which it was sometimes, or a rotary wing, I felt a tremendous sense of this might work. This actually is improving things. For this patient, because we got called in a timely way, because the patient is critical and we know what to do, we have the right providers on board, and to see that evolve, to see the talent of the crew evolve, to see the patients that we were shortening their hospital stay, keeping them away from ICU, and in fact, many times saving their lives, was truly rewarding. It made you want to make sure you kept your, what did they say, ear to the ground and nose to the grindstone to make this happen.
And happen it did. It wasn't long before we were invited to establish a base in Edmonton. And several years later, one in Grand Prairie, then Saskatoon, Regina, and ultimately Winnipeg. But hangars, aviation, and medicine aren't cheap. And we're a not-for-profit charity. So if STARS was going to survive, it needed to lean heavily on one thing: you.
You got to appreciate that my training is in critical care and emergency medicine. And so appreciating the nuances and the interesting things that happened in public awareness and fundraising was, for a while, the learning curve was steep. But after I outbid myself in a silent auction, I finally figured out that there's better ways to do this. And mostly it was third-party events. Like, people would put on these dine and dances or things. And of course, the memorable one, which we share the story of often, is Hannah.
Hannah is a small town east of Calgary, more than a 2-hour drive away.
We'd been going there for a number of years, but a group in Hannah got together, called themselves Hannah Helping Stars, asked me to come out there on a Friday night when I wasn't expecting to, walk through the door to this amazing 400-person community where the, absolutely as you'd expect it, the Women's Auxiliary was making the turkey dinner, and the docs were all there participating, and people were doing every kind of fundraising in the world: silent auctions, live auctions, throwing cards and hats, playing bingo, you name it. And then at the end of the evening, they called me and said, well, you have to come up to the podium and say a few words. And I got up to the podium, and I had not spoken, not said a word. And I think the standing ovation was 4 minutes long. And I just said, holy smokes, like, this isn't anything of what I was expecting on this trip. And then they gave me this check for $100,000. And I said, oh my goodness, like, one community, one evening. And then finally the elderly farmer, and you knew that he was rural because the leathered hands and stuff. And he just took a particular interest in finding me. And he said, you know, Doc, out here in Hannah, when you had the big one, you didn't make it. He said, now that you're here, we've got a chance. And that put a big light on my head. All they want to know is someone cares and that they have a chance, and they're treated as equals to the city dwellers.
Hannah certainly wasn't alone in showing support like this. Numerous other communities throughout Western Canada also became regular supporters over the years. A slow-burning fire that eventually swept the prairies, according to Linda Powell, Dr. Powell's wife and STARS ambassador.
The support of the community grew gradually because awareness grew gradually. And each base, whether it was Calgary or Edmonton, Grand Prairie, Regina, Saskatoon, Winnipeg, the public awareness would start slowly and gradually build. And then all of a sudden, there'd be some event or something that would happen, or maybe it was just time, where it mushroomed. As STARS became more well-known, entities would approach us and say, could we raise money for you? Everything from, I said, a bridge club to a ladies' auxiliary to Lions and Legions, which were very strong in fundraising all along for us. Many golf tournaments, donkey sales. One family had a toonie competition and see how many toonies they could line up on the railing of their balustrade of their stairs to their upstairs floor of their house. And all that money came to STARS. Some kids started raising money for us, selling lemonade and things like that. So it just grew by leaps and bounds. I remember once a neighbor said to me, I can remember when Greg had a twinkle in his eye about a helicopter and maybe being able to improve critical care for southern Alberta. And look where we are today. So it's pretty special.
And now, a quick word from our Season 2 sponsor.
As Canada's third largest natural gas producer and the largest producer of condensate, ARC Resources is proud to play an important role in the responsible development of Canada's energy resources. In delivering those resources, safety is the #1 priority, always. And it's that core value that makes ARC's partnership with STARS a natural fit. It's our shared goal to ensure that everyone arrives home safely at the end of the day. Learn more about how ARC is leading the way for safe and responsible energy development at arcresources.com.
Welcome back. It's time to hear from someone who lived through that evolution Linda Powell was talking about a moment ago.
I guess you could compare it to a high school track meet compared to the Olympic Games. That is the analogy that I would see STARS from its first days to where it is today. Just a tremendous jump to greatness, really.
That's Patricia Jeffrey, one of STAR's early flight nurses. She retired in 2021 and has an astounding knowledge of our organization's history. She remembers working in a Calgary hospital when STARS was first getting started.
I remember, like, when I was in nursing school, a lot of people they're all excited. They're running down the halls and they said, a helicopter is going to be landing in the parking lot. And they're bringing a patient up from down south. And at that time, the Holy Cross was our cardiac center. And I'm like, there's no way, like, bringing a patient up by a helicopter, like, who does that? And then I'm like, where are they going to land? And so we were all like our noses pressed against the window, looking down into the Holy's parking lot, which is crowded. And they managed to get this little aircraft parked right in front of the emergency department. And I remember we were just amazed at, like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that they would do that. And it was a life-saving. I remember that event because he needed emergency cardiac surgery, and it saved his life. But I just remember even the patients, we were all like looking out those west windows, looking at this going, this is amazing. And yet I thought it was always so cool because I was probably only second year nursing school at that point. And then for me to actually get to do it, for me to actually be on board that helicopter, that is what really I think was going through my mind when I was at the hangar for our initiation or our briefing, was that, oh my God, like, I saw this like 6 or 7 years ago, and now it's going to be a common occurrence as opposed to something so rare that people all stop and stare. So yeah, that was just it was like, like there was so many improvements with medicine. I mean, medicine is always evolving and improving, and this was just one more step. Like, it was a faster way to get that patient to definitive care. And yeah, it was really cool. It was so cool to be right there at the beginning for that to happen.
Patricia joined STARS in 1989 when the future of the organization was, well, uncertain, and medical crew members weren't being paid.
I mean, we started from such humble beginnings. I mean, every time we showed up for a shift, we only booked our shifts a month in advance because we didn't know if it was going to continue. I mean, that should tell you something. That, okay. And we didn't get paid anything. It was all volunteer. It was just, we'd show up and do a couple of shifts a month. And we believed in it. We really did believe in it, the medics and nurses and the pilots. I mean, we believed that it would make a difference to people. I mean, when we work in the hospital, we work hard. We work 12-hour shifts and we work hard. And with STARS, we were doing this on our days off for no financial return. We did it because we believed in it.
STARS Air medical crew soon became full-time paid staff members, and Patricia was part of that team. About 30 years later, she had flown more than 1,700 missions. That's a lot of touched lives.
When I have patients that come back and meet us or their families, it's the little things they remember. Oftentimes they'll say, I don't remember much, but I remember I could feel someone holding my hand. And it's not a treatment, but I would often do that. You've got a patient who's strapped to a backboard. Their neck is in a C-collar. They can't move. They're hurting. They've just been in a very traumatic event. And I would often take their hand and just put it on my knee because I was kind of perpendicular to them. And I would tell them before we lifted off, I says, now, if you need anything, if you're sick or you need something for pain or something, just squeeze my knee. and then I'll know, because otherwise, I mean, I can't hear you. And it's amazing how they're so scared, but that ability to communicate is something they'll never forget. And it's because, okay, I'm not just all of a sudden I'm in this really noisy thing and it's vibrating and I'm in pain and I don't know if my friend's alive. But by being able to reach out and touching someone and being able to communicate, it really lessens their stress. And to me, that would, like, it forms a bond. You're bonded with this patient. It's like you are their whole world. You know, you're the one that's going to either make them better or make their pain go away, or you are the most important person in that patient's life at that moment. And I just consider it like a bond.
It's true. I've been in the room when patients have come back to meet Patricia and other crew members, and almost all of them talk about that connection. One of those patients is Kelly Waldron, who we heard from off the top of this episode. When Kelly became our first very important patient in December 1985, it was the earliest version of STARS, which meant a helicopter leased from ALC Airlift was flown to a Calgary hospital, where a nurse and a doctor climbed aboard with whatever they could carry and flew to little Kelly.
STARS being first day on the job, they probably didn't know what they were going to have for a premature baby.
So that sending hospital in Lethbridge supplied the incubator.
So I guess they loaded me in the incubator and then put the incubator inside the helicopter, and then off we went.
As you might have guessed, Kelly survived and thrived. She is now an entrepreneur, is married, and is a mother herself.
That's probably what makes me more emotional about it, actually, is I couldn't begin to think what my mom went through, having her baby taken away from her and being told that she was probably never going to see us alive. She took a big leap of faith, that's for sure. I know if I had to call on STARS, I wouldn't hesitate. They're there. I have every faith in them that they can do what they have to do.
Now, almost 40 years later, Kelly has become one of our greatest ambassadors and has appeared in many of our signature publications. She has represented us at numerous events and shared in our joy as we passed many milestones. Most recently, in fact, we named one of our new helicopters after Kelly, a nod to our history and a recognition of all her support over the years.
I'm forever grateful for them to be there. I know my mom is too, and I will continue to do as much as I can for them for years and years to come. They are a family, and they are my second family.
You heard Kelly mention something a moment ago, that term, very important patient, or VIP. It's what we call any patients we carry who reach out to us after being in our care to get in touch with the crew who helped them. Sometimes those patients let us capture their reunion on video, like Mark Isler.
Come on in, come and meet Peter and Deanna.
Very well, thank you. I'm Mark.
As with Kelly, Mark is one of our earliest VIPs. Our cameras were rolling when he visited our hangar to reunite with the STARS team that cared for him 3 decades earlier.
It's a pleasure to be here, folks. I need to come into this facility again, and it just feels very good. Thank you.
So, what put Mark into our care in the first place? For that, let's jump to summer 1988.
From the police reports, from the medical reports, from the stories that I was told, this is an event that happened on June the 3rd. I lived in the city of Red Deer. I was driving near the place where I worked. My car was going very fast for some reason. The brakes got locked on, but the car still didn't stop. Ran into an 8-inch tree, knocked the tree over, went underneath a steel fence, and then fell off the riverbank 50 feet to the river below.
Mark's injuries nearly took his life. A friend in the car with him was also badly injured. Both men were rushed to Red Deer Regional Hospital, where staff on site knew they needed tertiary care in the city as soon as possible.
Ground transportation or ambulance on the road, there would have been no hope of getting us to a facility from Red Deer to Calgary or to Edmonton. The only way of getting me to a facility like the Calgary General was through the air. And STARS was able to do it in a time frame that meant the necessary resources and personnel and facilities could be used to bring me back. So Stars became the pivotal player in the very first chapter of my recovering from a traumatic event.
Dr. Peter Gant and flight nurse Deanna Green cared for Mark that day, and they were excited to reunite with him 30 years later.
It's just a pleasure.
That's Deanna. She said Mark's mission was a perfect illustration of why STARS was needed in the first place all those years ago.
For me, this particular thing is a validation of what trauma care and STARS was all about in its inception. This was the reason that it started. And to see Mark now alive, well, functioning in family and employment, and to have all his faculties is a pleasure.
She's proud to be part of STARS' roots.
It was exciting. It was cutting-edge trauma care being developed in the province, and I felt privileged to be part of it. I'd do it again tomorrow if they'd have me.
Dr. Gant also cherished seeing Mark again.
It's fascinating to come back after 30 years and meet a patient who was so seriously injured, and really to have had the privilege in potentially having saved his life.
He remembers what STARS was like in those earliest of days.
It was somewhat less sophisticated than it is today. We had to carry all our own equipment with us, so the way we were set up was the helicopter, which was relatively empty, would come and land in the baseball field below the Calgary General Hospital. And we would bring all of our equipment down on a stretcher and then load it into the aircraft. The equipment wasn't secured in the ceiling or on racks, etc., the way it is today. So it was a little less sophisticated than the machine is today. It's come a long way. I had the privilege of working for STARS for 30 years. And in that 30 years, we've gone from sort of a relative fly-by-night operation when it first started, good principles, but still a lot of growth to occur, to the point now where we have a lot of sophisticated equipment that has been very well worked out as far as where it goes in the aircraft and how it's secured in the aircraft, as well as the training of the air medical crew. The sophistication of the medical expertise of the air medical crew in STARS now, after so many years, is really just amazing to watch.
Seeing Mark 30 years later truly seemed to touch his heart.
Mark was as close to dying as I think any of our patients get. And through the expertise of the people that were there at the scene that were able to extricate him, plus the expertise of the individuals in the Red Deer Hospital that helped to stabilize him until such time as we got there, plus all the expertise of the crews, etc., and the teams that were brought into play at the Calgary General, we were able to salvage his life. He was critically ill.
If you're going to talk about the origins of STARS, you have to acknowledge a lot of influential people. One of them is Ken King, a flight paramedic who has cared for thousands of patients over the years. He's been around for every groundbreaking evolution at STARS so far, including the development of what is now the STARS Emergency Link Center.
It's come a long way.
Ken is a passionate and compassionate crew member with STARS to this day. In fact, he's a critical player in how the organization developed over the years.
Well, we began as a group of volunteers really borrowing whatever we could to do what we needed to do. One of the things that I think we quickly learned is that the helicopter is a transportation tool. There's a lot more to caring for critical care patients. You need sending physicians and EMS that have skills. They need to know when to call. They need to have resources themselves to take care of critically ill and injured patients. And the system needs to be ready to respond to their calls. And they need to do it quickly because they're under-resourced and they're typically very busy. And those were all the things that we learned in the early years, and those are in place now. You know, it's been an absolute privilege to be able to do this work. I say it's a thrill of a life type of work, and to be able to do it for 30 years is, and more to come, is an absolute privilege. I'm totally blessed.
The origin story of STARS wouldn't be complete without talking to the pilots who quite literally got it off the ground.
My name is Bob Young. I started with STARS in July 1986. One of the first 4 residential pilots that were here. I flew 3,128 missions here, and it formed about half of my life working at STARS.
Bob is a legend at STARS. We spoke with him in 2019 in the hangar a few months after he retired, and when we weren't being interrupted by people shaking his hand, it was watching the crew leave on a mission that stole his attention.
It's interesting, there's a flood of thoughts going through my mind right now. Everything from my respect for those people doing what they do, and how they're going out there to help somebody, and they're using all of the skills that they have, which are, I don't think anybody's more skilled than the crews here, to help someone. And that's what this organization's all about.
We talked to Bob that day for nearly 2 hours. And the crew that left when we began our conversation came back as we were wrapping up. He swiveled in his stool and watched the helicopter land, a tear in his eye.
You can't help but wonder when you look at that, did it save somebody's life? Is somebody going to go home and in 5 days, 10 days, 15 days and hug their loved one? Because that red machine and the skilled people inside it saved their life? That's what I think of when I see that red helicopter flying through the sky.
Another legendary pilot at STARS was Greg Curtis, who pretty much ran the place with Dr. Powell in the early days. He recalls how the passion of the medical crew affected the pilots.
Many of us had given up significant career moves to put this together, so it became important to us that it was going to be successful. There was those 3, 4, 5-year period at the beginning. It was a slug. We were certainly in a happy mode by virtue of just having each other and working and could see some of the things, because there was a tremendous amount of sync with disciplines like trauma nurses to medics that were just so excited about all this. It was overwhelming, and because they're so patient orientated and people orientated in that regard. So that kind of spilled over on pilots too, and that became part of our DNA. And many of us picked up on that. That was part of our mojo as we moved ahead and where we were going to go. So that helped some of us to stay around and be part of this as we built the organization.
Which brings us back to Dr. Greg Powell and what he thinks of how far STARS has come.
You can't really not feel extremely humbled and proud at the same time. The integrity and the emphasis that this particular organization, through all of the efforts of many, have brought to the critical care environment and the survival of patients who are critically ill or injured has been remarkable. It's not about the helicopters. It's about people, and it's about the care providers. And it doesn't matter if they get there by helicopter or fixed wing or dog sled. They get there, and they do a wonderful job of taking care of critically ill and injured people. Success for STARS, I think, is meeting the needs of the patients we serve. And it doesn't matter where they are. And I think we're good at that.
Special thanks to everyone who participated in this bonus episode of Mission Ready. It was produced entirely in-house by us, with original music by Kaya Gamble, the daughter of one of our longtime former pilots. You can find her music at kayagamble.com. That's Kaiya Gamble.com.
Want to be a STARS ally? Visit stars.ca to learn about our educational programs and industry services, to browse our merchandise shop, and to read stories from more than 30 years worth of very important patients just like Kelly and Mark.
Be sure to also check out the rest of Mission Ready as we take you on an in-depth journey behind the scenes of a real mission.
If you liked this episode, please hit the subscribe button, tell your friends to do the same, and then rate and review the show. It'll really help us get the word out. Thanks for listening.